everyone, so today I'm doing a book review slash book talk on An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. So this is an adult fiction book. Recently I've heard some buzz about this book and then my friend Hope read it and she recommended it to me, so I checked the audiobook out of my library and I have to say it was a really beautiful story. I loved the audiobook version of it, so if you are going to pick this book up, I would highly recommend the audiobook. I loved the narrators that they had. Their voices were perfect for this story and it just was a really intriguing story to listen to. First off, this book takes place in southern Louisiana, so I'm very familiar with a lot of the places that are mentioned in this book and the cities. I've at least heard of them, if not been to them. Parts of it also take place in Atlanta, so I loved the setting of the story. And we follow two main characters, Roy and Celestial. Soon after they get married, Roy is wrongfully incarcerated for a crime that he did not commit. Roy is a black man, and so this book does explore the injustices that he's experienced and all of the characters have experienced due to racism, but that really just sets the stage for the story. This story really dives into Roy and Celestial's relationship and how Roy's time in prison affected them as a couple and as individual people, and it just really shows how love and marriage can be affected by something that's not even anyone's fault. However, Roy and Celestial did have their problems before Roy was sent to prison. This book just goes into all of that, and for me it was just a lot of raw and real emotions. It was insightful for me to read about these people's experiences, and it was also impactful to know that this kind of thing happened all the time and still happens. So like I said, it was an emotional story. By the end of it, I did have tears in my eyes and it just really pulled at the heartstrings. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I loved the writing. It flowed so beautifully and the prose was perfect for an audiobook. As I mentioned, I loved the voices in the audiobook, so to me that just added such a wonderful quality to the story and I'm so glad I listened to it. I will say this is very much a character-driven story. I feel like there's not a lot going on with the plot necessarily. It's really about these characters' lives after this event takes place. But for me, the story was still very much fascinating and engaging, even though it was character-driven. I didn't want to stop listening to it, and I couldn't wait to see how it all was going to end and where the pieces were going to land. At some point in time, I loved and hated all of the characters. Tayari Jones knows how to play with your emotions. All of these characters have flaws, but they all have really strong points as well. Roy is so fiercely loyal and loves Celestial so much, but Celestial is such a strong, independent woman and she doesn't need anyone. She is no one's to own, and I thought that was a beautiful part of her character, but it also made her kind of hard-headed and stubborn and a little bit frustrating at times. And then we have another character named Dre. He's Celestial's longtime best friend from when they were little, and I just found him to be so like patient and understanding, and he just really understood Celestial and her emotions and what she needed. So the intertwining of these three characters and their personalities and their emotions just made for such a gripping story, even if most of the plot was fairly subdued and not a lot going on. I could see how maybe some people would find it a little bit boring, but I was sucked in by these characters' lives. But that's partially why I didn't give it 5 stars, is because some of the decisions the characters made, some of the things that happened were just pretty frustrating, and I was just like, why are you doing this? Why did this happen? Why are you being like this? So it took away a little bit from my enjoyment, I guess, but for the most part I thought it was a truly resonating story. I do kind of want to talk about a few spoilers, nothing major, but there are just a few things I wanted to include in this book talk. So if you haven't read this book, leave now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video, but if you have read the book, please stick around so maybe we can talk about a few points in the book. Definitely leave your thoughts in the comments, but if you are going to say a spoiler, just warn people beforehand. I just quickly wanted to mention a few things. The first thing is I loved the metaphor of the hickory tree in this book. It's on the cover and trees are mentioned a few times in the story. Mostly whenever Roy was talking about how a marriage is like grafting a limb onto an already grown tree. In the end, whenever Roy was trying to cut down the tree, it's like he was trying to cut down almost his feelings for Celestial and the bond that they have in their past, but the tree grew back anyway and the tree survived, and to me that was kind of like their spirit. even though they didn't end up together in the end, what they had was still special in its own way. Their love for each other could still survive time and the hurt that they've experienced. I didn't think that Roy and Celestial could still remain married after everything, especially the night that they spent together after he was released from prison, how she was willing to give herself to him even though she clearly didn't want to, and how he had to tell her that he was not a rapist. And I felt like that line just held so much meaning. Even after all of the injustices that he experienced, he went to prison for being a rapist even though he didn't do it. He didn't let those things turn him into what everyone thought he was, if that makes sense. Like, he didn't let this horrible accusation actually turn him into that, and it's like he was proving to himself that he wasn't a rapist. He had to tell himself that for 5 years. He had to try to convince people of that for 5 years. Even if people said they knew he didn't do it, you know, he still felt like he had to convince them. And I think that was just a really harsh moment of him telling himself and telling Celestial that that's not who he was, and he didn't let the injustices make him into one, so he was not going to force himself on her. So I thought that that was a really important moment. To me, one of Roy's and Celestial's downfalls was just Roy was just so fiercely protective of her and just wanted her to be his, and she, like I said before, she was never going to be anyone's. And I think in the end, ultimately, Dre understood that. And that's why they worked so well together. Celestial's father even told Roy that whenever Roy was trying to ask for Celestial's hand in marriage, he was like, you know, her hand is not mine to give. She doesn't belong to anyone. I think Roy could never fully grasp that. I was torn about how I wanted the book to end. I knew that Celestial and Roy couldn't end up together, still married. And I'm glad Roy ended up with Davina. They were super cute together and she helped heal him. So I'm glad that they both didn't end up alone, for sure. And the ending was sweet, even though they'd went through all of this stuff. I'm really glad that the book ended on a really nice, pretty happy note. And those are all of my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my book talk, book review, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.